Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel and Happy New Year, because this will most likely be going live in 2022. I hope that whatever you did for Christmas and New Year, if you celebrated, that you had a great one. We had a very quiet Christmas and a very quiet New Year as well actually, but very excited to be in 2022. I will have another video going up next week talking about some of my reading plans for 2022, giving you a little update on where we are as a family and just the various different things that we've got going on, so do look out for that. I'm very excited to kind of sit down and chat through it all with you. But today is going to be my December reading wrap up, and it's going to be very short and concise because I picked up 4 books in December. I read 3, I DNF'd 1. I didn't have the best reading month in December. It really wasn't quite what I was expecting. I did also pick up Tombland by CJ Sansom at the end of December and read 300 pages. I don't know why I thought that I would be able to finish an 800-page book in a few days before the start of the new year, but that was the decision that I made, and I did read 300 pages, but barely made a dent in the huge volume that this is, so we're kind of semi-counting that. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump in and I will talk you through the books that I read in December. So the first book that I picked up was Always in December by Emily Stone. This is a book that I have mixed feelings about. On the one hand, I thought that it was quite clever. On the other hand, it markets itself as a Christmas romance book, which I think conjures up certain expectations as a reader of what you're going to get within the covers, and this book is almost the direct opposite of that. So when I wanted to kick off my December with quite a light-hearted, easy to read romance, this wasn't exactly it, and so I'm a little bit on the fence. So we have our main character Josie, who lost her parents when she was a young girl in a tragic accident on Christmas Eve, and as a result of that she finds it very hard to be around the joy and merriment and celebration of the Christmas season, as you might expect, because it has a negative connotation for her, and B tries to avoid going home to see her grandparents because they still live in the same house and the village where they lived when she lost her parents, and she went to live with her grandparents, and that's where she grew up. Josie also writes a letter to her parents every year around Christmas time, and she posts it to them, and it is on one such occasion when she's out on her bike going to post her letter that she literally collides with a stranger, and Max is the stranger that she collides with. He has his own reasons for wanting to avoid the Christmas season, and so they are very much thrown together. They spend the next couple of days getting to know each other, building a relationship, falling for each other, especially in the case of Josie, and so their story kind of begins. As I say, my main problem with this book is that it isn't the romance, light-hearted, warm, fuzzy Christmas romance that I was expecting it to be. There are a number of points of convenience, so if that's a bugbear for you, I don't think that you would enjoy this. Just a couple of examples. Oh, of all the thousands of cities that we could be in, we both happen to be in the same one, in the same gallery. Or, oh, thousands of miles away, we also happen to have mutual friends and we've come to their wedding, and you're a friend of a friend of a friend, but somehow you've been invited to this wedding that I am also at, etc, etc. The redeeming feature for me, although it meant that it wasn't kind of the light-hearted, fuzzy romance book I wanted, was the fact that the ending was quite unexpected. I had my own kind of theories and versions of what I thought the book was going to be, and it was none of those things. It completely took me by surprise. It was an absolute shock, a definite tearjerker, and although it very much removed the book from the genre that I was expecting to read, I did also think that it was quite clever, and I appreciated the way that the author brought everything together. It's also very readable, and there were parts that were quite enjoyable. I think for me, I struggled to sympathise with our main character Josie, which then undermined my overall enjoyment of the book, and I wasn't ever really rooting for her, which again I think became problematic as I was reading it. So a bit of a beige review to kick things off. I gave it 3 stars. I thought that it was alright, it just wasn't what I was expecting, and then yeah, there were a few little things that I didn't particularly appreciate. Next, I picked up The Arctic Curry Club by Danny Red. This was an ARC which I was sent by Avon Books ahead of its release in December, and It was probably my favourite book of December, but again, not quite the light-hearted, easy read that I had been hoping for. So we have our main character, Maya, who moves with her boyfriend Ryan to Longyearbyen, which is the world's northernmost city in the Arctic. So Ryan, her boyfriend, gets a job offer there, some kind of research thing, and she moves with him. Maya suffers with anxiety, which affects a lot of what she does, and I have to say that I felt, as a person who suffers with anxiety, the representation for it was great. So much so that a couple of times when she's having kind of a panic attack, I could feel the echoes of that in myself, because I could so clearly identify with what was happening and how she was feeling and what had triggered it, etc, etc. So I was really pleased to see quite an accurate representation of anxiety and how it can affect people's lives. So very much appreciated that from the author. Before moving to Longyearbyen, Maya was working as a chef. She actually left that job because of the way that her former boss treated her, and she also has no memories of her life in India before she moved to the UK with her dad following the death of her mother. Again, not the most light-hearted of reads, and obviously Maya has stepped into quite an extreme set of circumstances, and through various things that happen, she is sort of pushed into a period of self-reflection and self-discovery. This book also centres quite heavily around food. Maya is given her mother's old recipe book, and she begins to play with and cook the recipes and adapt them for the kinds of meats and foods that you can get in the Arctic, hence the Arctic Curry Club. And through doing that, she begins to unlock and uncover some memories about her mother, which then lead on to bigger questions and more self-discovery, etc, etc. I really liked the character of Maya. I thought she was great. There was a smidgen of romance, but this is very much about Maya's journey and Maya empowering herself and finding out what she wants and who she wants to be. Very, very enjoyable. Some laugh out loud moments. Obviously the Arctic is quite a bleak setting, and I did appreciate, at one point she goes back to India, and I did appreciate the stark differences between the bright, vibrant, noisy city of Bangalore, where she goes, against the very harsh, bleak, dark place in the Arctic where she is in Longyearbyen as well. I thought that was a very clever contrast that the author created. So yeah, on the whole, I gave this 4 stars. It was very enjoyable. There were points when I was frustrated with Maya, but as I say, the mental health representation in terms of anxiety, the setting, the food, Maya's journey, all just came together, and it was a very, very enjoyable read. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Christmas Escape by Sarah Morgan. This was probably the closest that I got to a Christmas romance, but again, the emphasis on this book, although there was a romance and it did feature quite heavily, it was more to do with the friendship between our 2 main characters. So I kind of got there a little bit, but not quite as much as I would have hoped, and certainly not 1 out of 4 books to fit the bill. So this is about 2 characters. We have Christy and we have Alex, and they have been best friends since childhood. And one year, Christy gets the opportunity to reconnect with an estranged family member who lives in Lapland, and so they decide to go and visit over the Christmas period. We have various things going on in Christy's home life. She has worked her whole life to create a very structured, organised and secure environment for her husband, herself and her daughter, but something happens which throws that off a little bit, and Christy has to begin to question where that need for control came from and how it's impacted her in terms of the way that her life looks. On the flip side, we have her best friend Alex, who grew up in a more chaotic home life and appreciated and enjoyed the security that she found being a part of Christy's circle. And Alex is the character who goes through the kind of romance with Christy's husband's best friend Seb. Up until they go to Lapland, Alex and Seb have a hate relationship. So this has the hate to love trope in it, and it's done quite well. I appreciated the chemistry and the friction and the dialogue between Alex and Seb. Alex is quite a frosty character. She tends to shut people out. She doesn't want to engage with them because she doesn't want to risk being hurt, which harks back to her childhood. and Seb just very much comes in and kind of dismantles all those barriers that she's put up, but in a very gentle and kind-hearted way. He doesn't just smash them down and tell her to get over herself, that kind of thing. So I really like the romance. The friendship is the kind of key point, that there are lots of changes happening for Christy and for Alex, and their friendship has had to shift after Christy got married, and things have gone on and things have been said and they've been allowed to fester and it's built up, and so they're kind of, when they go to Lapland, it's sort of a pinch point of they need to sort out their friendship. It's either going to continue to be a success or they're going to have to walk away from one another, and how is that then going to affect them, etc, etc. On the whole, it was very enjoyable. As I say, I liked the romance element. The friendship one was a little bit, in places it felt very sloggy and slow and dragged out, and we went over and over the same ground. We read from both Christy and Alex's perspective, and often we would get the same information from both, which meant it lacked pace and drive in places, and I would have liked more of the romance between Alex and Seb and less of the friendship element, because I feel like it would still have told the same story, but it would have given it a bit more pace and a bit more spice, and I would have liked that a little bit more. But yes, on the whole, this was a solid read. I gave it 3.5 stars. As I said, the closest that I got to a cozy Christmas romance this year, one that I would recommend if you like this type of book. And the last book that I picked up, which I actually ended up DNFing, was Rewrite the Stars by Emma Hetherington. This is a missed opportunity style book. So we have our main character Charlotte, who meets a guy called Tom when she is a student. Tom is a drummer in her brother's band. Her brother's band are set to be the next big thing in Ireland, but her brother thwarts her. Tom and Charlotte have this kind of instant connection when they meet, but her brother thwarts it and continues to kind of try to keep them apart. Flash forward 5 years and Tom and Charlotte meet again, and they take the opportunity to kind of rekindle what they thought they had. But Charlotte's brother has since, for some reason that we don't yet know, the band fell apart after signing a record deal, and it's something to do with Tom, but Charlotte's brother won't talk about it, and he struggles with his mental health and depression, and he's back at home, and Charlotte knows that he won't want her to be with Tom. And then various different things happen. Charlotte goes back home to tell her brother runs off and gets in an accident, and Charlotte's whole world becomes about her brother's rehabilitation. She ends up getting married to someone else, but she's constantly thinking about Tom, and that is at the point when I DNF'd the book. For me, it just didn't work. This concept that you could meet somebody and then build your whole life around a missed opportunity of something that you don't really know is there, and even when she meets him again 5 years later, they sleep together and that's it. It's like, okay, but you know, there's nothing more of substance there. When she gets married, it got even worse, because she was constantly talking about what a great guy her husband was, how understanding he was, how amazing her life was, but she still wondered about Tom, but she still wanted to be with Tom, who'd moved on and gone on with his own life. And there was just something about it that I found really jarring, really inauthentic, really inaccurate, and just not, it was like, I want to boast about how great my life is, but also have the best of both worlds, to have this great husband and have this great life and drive this big, I mean, at one point she talked about her big white flashy Land Rover, but then also have this kind of, she basically like built her connection with Tom up into this huge thing. I just didn't buy it, and in the end I didn't care about what happened. I figured that they will get together at some point, and then her brother Charlie, his kind of mental health journey and the way that everything revolved around him, the whole thing was just off for me. It didn't hit the mark, and I DNF'd it. It was a swing and a miss, unfortunately, although I would be interested to know if anyone had read it and what they thought. Maybe I just wasn't in the right frame of mind, but literally it got to the point where every time Charlotte was talking about anything, it was annoying me, basically. So there you go. the other books that I read in the month of December, a really mixed bag. I had 2 books that I really quite enjoyed. Just to say also, I'm very much enjoying Tombland, but this is not a light-hearted read. After getting to the end, after DNFing Rewrite the Stars, I was just done with light fluffy books for a while, so I picked up something darker and heavier, and this is very much ticking the box. And as I say, I read 300 pages of that. I do have a couple of kind of cozy winter reads to go back to once I finish Tombland, but I was just so disappointed by Rewrite the Stars that I just abandoned my TBR and picked up something entirely different. So there you go. Do let me know what your favourite book in December was. Let me know if you've read any of the ones that I read, and if you have the same thoughts or differing thoughts. I always love to chat more with you. For now, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you are all keeping safe and well. As I said, have a great start to 2022, and I will see you soon.